it was about time, and this is completely my fault, and I'm going to take the whole brunt of your ire, my dear viewers and listeners, that I had back the first person I ever interviewed. Graham, you were the first
I
ever.
was. I
Yeah,
did not know that. Oh, I'm
you
honored.
yeah you were, because I remember when I started doing the podcast and I wanted to do interviews, and I went to LinkedIn of all places,
Mm.
in one of the RPG groups in LinkedIn, and said, I'm looking for people to interview, and said, oh, I would be happy to go to your show. I was like, oh, okay. And then I found out who you were, and I thought, this is a proper RPG author. I'm going to
Oh,
talk to a
thank you.
proper RPG author. Oh, wow, that was amazing. And then, of course, we became friends in Facebook, and we've been following each other ever since. But I haven't had you in the show for a very, very long time, which is my fault entirely. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, thank you. And I can see you're doing well. And I'm very happy to see how your media empire is growing.
Well, here in GMS Towers, we're covering everything. We just,
I see
I
that.
think, yeah, we Murdoch come to throw himself at us, but I thought, I don't want petty people in my life. So
You
no,
don't want no,
no, absolutely not.
no small timers. Yeah.
Please, I don't have time for apprentices. So no, we're doing all right. I like,
Mm.
I like my media empire contained. So I'm happy with that. But you, though, you have worked on, well, I should say, for the one that's probably my favorite company at the moment. You've done some work, which is the reason I wanted to have you in the show. You've done some work for Free League when you
Mm.
wrote Mythic Britain.
Yes.
Now, the first question I have, and I would really like you to answer it as honestly as possible. And then, if the answer is not what it should be, I will take this little bit out of the interview. But I would like you to answer it as honest as possible. Is as awesome to work for Free League inside, and they appear to be from the outside, because they really look like an incredible company from where I stand. What is it like to work for them inside?
I enjoyed it very much. I found them a joy to work with, and they were very interested. I went to them with the project, um, and they were very receptive. And the editors and everyone I was working with, they asked really smart questions. They spotted a few errors and, more importantly, pointed out some opportunities that I'd overlooked.
Yeah.
And between us, we were able to make a very good book, in my humble opinion. And it was also a joy to be able to work with Johan Egerkrans, whose art really defines Vaesen.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, it's I have right now finished reading the Blade Runner. And then I have Sway Hunter, because David Fox sent it to me, and I need to get to grips with it. And then I have Vaesen
Mm,
in my queue. I've already done the unbooking video where I've taken a look inside the book,
right.
and oh my god, it's one of the tightest,
Yes.
nicest, and best. I was going to say caught uh, environments out there from the art direction point of view. Um,
Yes.
I presume that you were aware of Essen before you actually went to Free League with the project. Uh,
Yeah.
what did you make of the game when you read it? Apart from the visuals, which is amazing, but what did you make of the game?
Um, well, I found the system quite intriguing. Not I've written for some. I mean, I've written for GURPS and I wrote for 3.5, and so there's I wouldn't call it super rules light, the Year Zero engine,
Mhm.
but it was accessible. It was very accessible. It was easy to understand and easy to write for. And but beside the art direction, it was the setting that
Mhm.
grabbed me. I have to go into a little bit of personal history here, but when I first started playing Dungeons and Dragons. Well, no, further than that. When I was about 6, on my parents' black and white television one Saturday morning, I saw Jason and the Argonauts.
Oh, right.
And that was the beginning of my obsession with mythology, which led me to study archaeology at university, where I played far too much Dungeons and Dragons. And as a part of that, I was ransacking university libraries and local libraries for folklore to find new monsters to throw at my players. And out of that was born a more genuine, deeper interest in folklore, worldwide as a phenomenon, as a part of culture and everything else. And I thought for years, I want to make a role-playing game like folk horror, folk investigation, something that captures the folklore stories in a role-playing format. And the closest I got was in about 2000 and something, when I wrote GURPS Theory. Mm-hmm. And then I saw Vaesen, and I thought, they've done it. They have done what I've been dreaming of all this time, except they've done it in Scandinavia. Mm-hmm. And someone's got to write a Britain and Ireland source book, and that someone has got to be me. And so I just launched myself at Free League. I don't know what they thought when I approached them, but it was a mixture of bluster and begging. It's like, you need this book and you need me to write it. and luckily they were convinced.
Well, to be honest, I mean, you do have some history writing mythical creatures, because you've also wrote for Britannia game for their bestiary. So you weren't new at...
No, that's true. Yes, I had some form when it comes to role-playing mythology, folklore, and the point on the Venn diagram where they all meet.
How was the process to create the game itself? I'm interested in finding out, where does one begin to do research when you want to write this kind of books?
Mm-hmm. Well, apart from the fact that I had a lot of information about folklore monsters in my head and on the bookshelves behind me, structure, I started with structure because in the Vaesen core book, I think their chapter on the Mythic North is exemplary, and it sets out for people who aren't familiar with the setting very nicely, very accessibly, all the information that you need. So I simply took that as a template and plugged in the corresponding information for Britain and Ireland. Then it was a question of how many monsters can I have? And I think I proposed about 20 or 25. Mm-hmm. And Johan Egerkrans begged me for mercy, because he has to draw a full page for every single one. It's like, I can't do that. How about, I can't remember, it expanded through the Kickstarter. Mm-hmm. And I think we ended up with a dozen or maybe 15. So that left some space in the book, and I hadn't originally intended to put adventures in, mm-hmm. But Free League suggested it, and it was probably necessary to convey, different settings and stuff in the source book. So I wrote the 3 adventures at the end, and that was pretty much it. The monster treatment in Vaesen is one I really like. And that was very easy to follow, and so that's pretty much how I did it.
You say that you like the treatment of the monsters, the bestiary
yes.
in the Vaesen. What is it that you like about it? What grabbed you?
Well, the visual format is very clear. Their use of tables and boxes for information makes it a breeze to find anything you need. Mm-hmm. I also like the fact that every monster comes with 3 adventure seeds. And there's also a little section, I can't remember what it's called now, but it's basically the monster's weaknesses, how it is defeated. which in folklore is a very important thing because, you know, it might have hidden its heart in a silver chest at the bottom of a lake, and that's the only way to defeat it, is to go and find that.
It's interesting you mentioned that because one of the books I've read recently has been Beowulf by Johnny Hodgson.
Oh, yes.
And that is exactly one of the things that he also does, because his Beowulf is based on, well, Beowulf the poem, but also all the folklore around the United Kingdom Islands. And one of the things that his monsters have is that weakness. You know, you need to find out. It's not just a matter of going out there and just hit it until it dies, sort of thing.
Right.
It's a matter of what is their weak spot,
yes,
and how do you find it. So I like that. That is the same thing in Vaesen, because it makes it takes away the simplicity, in brackets, of actually just grabbing the biggest sword you can and being the strongest, you know, thing you can and hit it until it dies. In terms of the creatures themselves, how did you actually adapt them for the free league system, for the year zero engine? Because again, if you took the same creature like you did for sword and sorcery and then took it to Vaesen, could you just mimic exactly the same creature, or would they have to be slightly different and have some aspects of them enhanced and another ones less relevant?
Right.
How did you do that?
Well, you're absolutely right. You know, I wrote up the monsters for Mythic Britain and Ireland in a completely different way from how I would have written them up for, say, Dungeons and Dragons. And to my mind, one of the key differences between folklore, fantasy on the one hand and myth and folklore on the other is just that aspect that you've hit on, is that, you know, that monsters have to be more than just an armor class and a number of hit points. That's, I mean, that's why what attracted me to Call of Cthulhu 40 odd years ago was the fact that, you know, your player character can have a Tommy gun, but good luck against a Shoggoth.
Exactly. Yes.
You have to think and research and figure stuff out. And the way the monsters are presented in Vaesen, you know, they have this box. I've just remembered what it's called. It's called Ritual. And, you know, it's the shoot it with a silver bullet or make the sign of a cross over its grave or whatever, that kind of information. And in addition, the way abilities are expressed in the Year Zero engine as used in Vaesen are much more open-ended. They require more work on the part of the GM, but that makes them more adaptable to the players' skill levels, the character's power, you know, all the variables in an individual game. And it's also, you can kind of embrace the lack of mathematical precision and make something, you know, make something good out of it, rather than, you know, some systems, and I won't name any names, they're basically a set of algorithms. And all the role playing. I mean, the snarky comment used to be rule playing versus role playing, and you know, so the way Vaesen uses the Year Zero engine gets around that very, very nicely. And it's not going to be anybody's first game, I think, certainly not as a GM. But when you're a GM with a little bit of experience, it gives you so much more freedom, and the tools are so much more powerful.
That is actually very true of that engine, and it doesn't surprise me at all to hear you say that, because it's you know, even reading through the starter set for Blade Runner, and it uses the same system, but it is modified to make it, you know, more science fiction accessible, I suppose. But even for that, the level of abstraction that it requires from the GM to apply the rules to a specific situation, you do require a little bit of experience to know to say, maybe Instead of rolling for this, I'm just going to let people do it, or maybe I'm going to do it this other way.
Yeah.
It takes some while. How long did it take you though to think in a year engine fashion to be able to convert the creatures that were in your head into a mechanical system that you were less familiar with?
Not too long, frankly. It was a more painless process than, say, working for 3.5 or even Chivalry and Sorcery, because firstly, once you grasp the philosophy, the approach of the system, and know that you have a little bit of leeway, that's nice. But also having the bestiary chapter of the core rulebook as an example to work from, that made it a lot easier. If I was in doubt about a particular stat, I could just look and I could say, well, okay, it's more powerful than this creature here, but it's less powerful than this creature here. And I could plug a rough number in. And I said to the folks at Free League, listen, I'm not really a stat head, so take my numbers as suggestions. And so they were a great help in fine tuning it. Nils Hintze, I think it was, who wrote the system or the core book, was particularly helpful that way. Great guy to work with.
Which one was your favorite creature to convert to this system?
Well, I have to say it's a creature from Orkney called a Nuclear V.
Okay.
And
completely new to me.
It's imagine a demonic centaur, which is actually a sort of fusion of horse and rider. So it still has the equine head, but it has the body of the rider fused onto it. And it looks like a sort of surrealist painting, and it has no skin. It has black blood flowing beneath yellow membranes. It's horrific in appearance. It comes out of the sea and blights the crops with its breath, and it has so many weird aspects and potentially quite extreme powers that it was really interesting to work on. Beside the fact that it's almost never been described for a role-playing game ever.
I mean, it probably hasn't been described very often at all. I've never heard of such a creature in the 17 years I lived in the UK, but it sounds terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
How did you find these things?
Well, over the years, I've built up quite a good folklore library, and I put in the back of the Mythic Britain and Ireland, I put a short bibliography in there with the most useful ones. And I first came across it in a book called The Dictionary of Fairies, which was I picked up in the 70s, but it was written somewhat earlier than that by a lady called Catherine Briggs, who was a leading academic in folklore studies in Britain at that time.
And she considered that creature to be a fairy?
Well, she used fairy in the same way that they use Free League uses Vaesen in its broadest sense to mean, a supernatural creature or person.
Okay, because I mean, if she considered that to be a fairy, I can't imagine what she might have considered to be a demon or what it would be like.
Yeah, no, quite. Yeah, I suspect that the title was, fairies was used in the title with a view to sales.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, I can imagine an awful lot of children getting very scared all of a sudden by getting this book. Oh, look, it's just about fairies. Mom, there is a half horse, half man with no skin on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here,
That's
free trauma for you, child. There you go.
That's right. Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't think it would work in a children's book for absolute certain. But Briggs was pretty academic in her approach for all the sort of popular title.
Well, I have to say though, it does sound pretty amazing. So that's one to look forward to. What was the more challenging aspect of working on this project for you?
honestly, I was always fighting. It was always a struggle between what I wanted to do and the space I had available in the book.
Okay.
I wanted to put more monsters in. I actually brief commercial break here, folks. I've done some monsters using the Free League Workshop on Drive-Through RPG. They should be searchable.
And there should be a link in the show notes.
Right, you are. So, you know, that was there were some things that just I couldn't fit in the book. There was one thing in particular, a Scottish creature called pardon my pronunciation, Gaelic speakers, a Fachan, I think it's pronounced, which is a kind of an ogre, but with only one leg, only one arm, only one eye. Not a half person, but an actual sort of everything in the center, you know, the arm in the center of the chest, the eye in the center, Cyclops fashion, etc. And Johan wrote back to me and said, I've tried to draw this and it just I can't draw it in a way that doesn't look goofy. So I said, well, fair enough, we won't put it in the book then. But then I found some copyright free art and put together a description in the Free League Workshop. And that's how that started. I think I've got 6 or 8 monsters up there now. But to return to the question you actually asked, it was always a struggle with space. There was room for 3 adventures in the book. But of course, the United Kingdom and Ireland consists of 4, arguably 5 nations. Mm-hmm. And so how do I represent that fairly within 3 adventures? I had to do one in Victorian London because, I mean, you've got to, if you're doing anything 19th century set in Britain, you've got to have a chance to meet Sherlock Holmes and Jack the Ripper and all of that. You've got to cover London. I did another in rural Britain, in Gloucestershire, to kind of stress the difference between town and country, and then a 3rd one in Wales. And there wasn't room for one in Scotland. There wasn't room for one in Ireland, and it's something that I still regret. So that was the biggest struggle, mm-hmm. was what to leave out and why, and how to choose what to go in.
Isn't that always the struggle of any writer who writes something like this? Because I don't think I've ever met any who didn't say, I wanted to have another 300 pages.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Yes. And the more passionate the writer is about the subject, the greater the pain of that dilemma.
Agreed. And what was the nicest discovery? What was the thing that you thought that you looked at one point and thought, oh, hell, I didn't know this. This is amazing.
Goodness me. I think it was some of the local legends in the geography section. I tried to include at least one local legend for every town. And there's that in general. I can't really call out a specific one as particularly interesting, but you know, you can't. I guess because Britain and Ireland, they have such a long history that you can't, you know, travel 5 or 10 miles without coming across some local legend, some cryptid, some haunting, some monster. And some of them are really quite surprising. One of my favorites, I suppose, would be from East Anglia. Now, the hag is a well-known class of monster, and there are many, many variations throughout Britain and Ireland. And they have one in, I believe it's East Anglia, called Black Annis. And I think the Annis has been adapted as a hag for D&D. Mm-hmm. The folklore version is quite terrible, with blue skin and iron-hard claws, and reaches in through windows and pitchforks children out with her long, sharp nails to eat them and things like that.
Nice.
Yeah, and you know, folklore and fairy stories, they didn't have to worry about ratings back in the day. Some really, you know, you think the Knuckle-RV is horrific just by its appearance, but some of the things that some of these monsters did, Yeah, definitely not ready for prime time.
Did you have to tone it down for the game, any of these things?
I tried to express things in such a way that avoided gratuitous violence and general edgelordiness, because that's just not a good approach to take to anything. But I tried to, present the folkloric reality, and without sensationalizing, or without really leaning into gore, but just giving the information there, and individual GMs can kind of use it or adapt it, or move the slider up or down depending on the preferences of their campaign.
That sounds nice indeed. Tell me a little bit, and to start wrapping this up a little bit as well, because otherwise we'll be here overnight easily. What are the adventures like, in the sense of the flow of the adventures? In Call of Cthulhu, we have investigation being the core thing. In D&D, we have the battling being the thing. Other games is the exploration. What is the flow of the adventure? What's the spirit of the adventure?
I'd say it's much closer to Call of Cthulhu than to D&D. Okay. The player characters, according to the conventions of the game, are members of an esoteric society. Okay. And the adventure starts with a letter arriving, or someone getting in touch who has a problem. And it could be, an old college friend, or an acquaintance, or a distant relative, or something. That's a kind of a convention within the game. It doesn't have to be as clunky as it sounds if the GM handles it right, and if the players all buy in. Anyway, so phase one, being aware of the problem. Partial information from a layperson, etc. Phase two, and there's a great chapter on structuring adventures in the core book, and of course all the adventures published for Vaesen follow a very, very strict, very good format. Phase two is then preliminary research. You have access to a library because the society is well funded and well equipped. And so research and preparation. Phase three is arriving on site, interviewing witnesses, on-site investigation, and evidence gathering. And then the final phase is the confrontation. And that can be, depending on the creature, depending on the adventure itself, depending on the preferences of the GM and the gamers, that can be a D&D style showdown, a battle against an ogre or something. Or it can be a war of nerves as a, stealthy, naturally invisible trickster creature mounts increasingly deadly attacks because it's offended that someone's bothering it. Or it can be, a more Call of Cthulhu outcome where you either know what to do about the creature, conduct the appropriate ritual, and the problem's solved, at least for now, or you try something and die horribly.
I like the options.
Yeah. And one of the, again, the thing that blew me away, or one of the things about Vaesen, was the formats that they used they're just so good, so useful to the GM, because there's actually within the adventure template, there's a whole thing like countdown and crisis, and it forces the writer to think about these things. How are you going to escalate tension? What's going to happen if things go right? What's going to happen if things go wrong? Is the problem solved forever, or will like Dracula, will the monster be back again? And the formats support this absolutely beautifully, and that makes it a real pleasure to write for, because it's almost, tools for the GM, yes, but they're also a very good tool for the writer.
That's very, very interesting indeed, because it's, I mean, I think you just literally tipped my balance into investigating further into that engine, because I've been looking for something. I am not good at writing for 5e. It's just not my thing. And I have written an awful lot of adventures for Call of Cthulhu, but I don't want to go there because everybody's going there. So I think you just tipped it into me investigating this a little bit, because it makes it, you're making it sound as if the system helps guide the writer as much as the rules themselves, really.
That was certainly my experience, yes.
That sounds good. Mythic Britain Volume 2? Would you like to work on that? Do you think there's a chance for that to happen at some point?
Well, I did follow up with Free League with a couple of proposals. And while they were very kind and about what I sent, their interest right now, I believe, and this information may be old, but I believe they're more interested in expanding to additional areas. You know, for example, Eastern Europe with Slavic folklore, or some other part of the world.
No, which to be perfectly honest, is fair enough. And I'm trying to appeal to as many countries as possible. I think it would be it makes more business sense than trying to appeal more to Britain. But you're still writing more creatures and putting them up in drive-through?
I put a few up in drive-through, and when time permits, I'll probably be doing a few more. One thing that Johan Egerkrantz and I did put together fairly recently was there wasn't a bibliography in the Vaesen core book, and we felt that because, particularly in the English edition, the readers aren't going to be that familiar with Scandinavian folklore, that would be quite useful. So we put one together with our combined resources, because of course he'd researched very deeply, because Vaesen, I don't know if you know this, actually is a gaming adaptation of an art book that Johan published.
Okay.
Sort of a Scandinavian answer to Brian Froud's work on fairies from way back when. And so he had quite a few sources. I had a few of my own, and we put that together, and it's up on drive-through as a free download for anybody who wants to read around a little bit on Scandinavian folklore before playing Vaesen in the Mythic North.
Well, I will make sure that those links are in the show notes and the video description, because that sounds absolutely amazing. Graeme, thank you so much for being with me today. I hope your current job secret project that will hopefully come out to the light in the next few months goes as well as you deserve, which it is a lot.
Thank you very much.
And we can hopefully talk about that in the future as well.
I'm looking forward to being able to talk about it, yes. And always a pleasure to talk to you, Paco. Thank you for having me back.
Anytime.